So what about Rusalka, the opera we're featuring today? It doesn't go as far as Don't Guess, but it goes far enough in crucial places. It is gorgeous music, similar to Tchaikovsky's Queen of Spades. At the end of the century, there are bel canto Italian-style arias, there's urban-style Petersburg salon romances, there's duets and trios, there's liturgical music, folk choruses, dances, strophic songs. Dragomushki doubles the number of choruses and dances that he found in Pushkin's play. In other words, this is Russia as the most cosmopolitan place in the world, and in fact that case has been made that Petersburg, not after the Bolshevik Revolution, but before it, was the most cosmopolitan musical center, and incidentally, the least censored. If you look at this cosmopolitanism in Rusalka, however, you find out that the construction of the individual songs is still episodic and declamatory. That is, it follows the moods of the text. It doesn't take on an identity musically, orchestrally underneath. The music fits itself to the developing personality, to the dramatic discussions, plots, not the other way around. Now the question we have to ask, and the question that was seriously asked in the 1920s, were these radical realist Russian nationalist composers badly trained, as Tchaikovsky suggested, or did they simply desire a different sound? Perhaps they had another sort of musical artwork in mind, something between operatic expression and everyday expression or everyday experience. And in fact, does everyday experience have a genre, a musical genre, characteristic of it? Did the mighty handful have an untrained ear or a revolutionary ear? And again, with a folklore opera like Rusalka in mind, Stravinsky is a wonderful benchmark because he was a stylizing modernist. The sort of folk or peasant culture that appealed to Stravinsky, a sacrificial dance ritual, a peasant wedding full of ritual laments, a highly formulaic folk jingle like the Owl and the Pussycat. There's lots of comedy and tragedy in Stravinsky, but it's distanced, it's cerebral, rather than emotional directly. This was not only modernist technique on his part, that is harmonic texture, serial composition. Stravinsky accepted what the people on this slide, the so-called mighty handful, never accepted, and that is that peasant or folklore musical genres were not realistic. That is, they were not mimetic. They didn't imitate ordinary talk. Quite the contrary. They were highly formulaic, the product of a patriarchal, passive, fatalistic culture. Russian folk culture was not sentimental. It did not indulge individual feelings. Individuals suffered, of course, but there was no cult of the virtuosic, ornamented aria that celebrated how the inner life of one suffering person differed from the inner life of some other suffering person. All of that's Western bourgeois individualism, folks. It's all tied up with human rights, with material progress. Russian suffering in her folk plots, the Russian passion, in the original meaning of that word, is more cyclical, collective, communal. The whole point of peasant ritual was to reconcile its members to individual tragedy and loss by depersonalizing grief, by standardizing it. It's not just you who suffers, everyone suffers like this, and therefore you don't rebel, you accept life, you accept death, you blend into the whole, and you serve the whole. Now this is an image of folk culture that is subsistence and traumatized, and for that reason stylized. What mattered was not personal vengeance, but collective fate. And I believe that Stravinsky understood this better than any composer in the Western world. In reflecting Russian folk culture, Stravinsky did not set ordinary, everyday speech to music, nor did he indulge the traditional, very beautiful but cliched lyric motifs, cadential melodic patterns of folk romances, dominance descending to the leading tone and then ascending to the tonic. He doesn't do that. That's not the way he hears the folk. He does it more angular, more ostinato. He, in fact, sets music against the natural accent of spoken speech, and that, in fact, is how Russian folk performance did it.